Hi, hello, welcome back. My name is Kim. This is Kim Reads and Reviews, and today we're going to be talking Tin Man by Sarah Winman. I know that this is not new, shiny, a freshly published book. I know it's not any of those things, but I recently read it, loved it, and want to share my thoughts. If you had asked me what my top tier books are, this would fall into it for sure. I'm going to go over the plot of it, maybe talk about some themes that are present within it, and share some quotes that are directly from it that really I think represent Sarah Winman's just beautiful writing. It's only 200 pages, but it really covers quite a bit as far as grief, sexual identity, kindness, and love, and I think it's an absolute work of art, honestly. I'm gonna try my best to talk about this book without spoiling anything, because the summary that you'll probably see on Storygraph or Goodreads or whichever kind of site you use is very brief and it doesn't really say much, but I went into this expecting some really good writing and that's what I got, and then some. So we follow two characters in this. We follow along with Alice and Michael. They meet when they are younger, when Michael's mother dies, and he moves to Oxford, which is where Ellis lives, to be with his grandma. They both become very fast friends and are young boys who are very kind of tender and are in touch with this gentle side of themselves, and they both kind of fuel that for each other a little bit. And Ellis's mother, Dora, really acts as a mother figure for Michael as well. She also is very in touch with her artistic side and creative side and just very soft in her own way, and is just that positive influence for both Ellis and Michael when they're younger. We eventually come to a point where Ellis and Michael share a kiss with one another during a time of severe grief for both of them, and so it kind of becomes something more than just friendship for the two of them. Flash forward, Ellis meets Annie and they fall in love, and Annie becomes entwined in Ellis and Michael's friendship. At this point, you're probably thinking, but wait, weren't Ellis and Michael a thing? Didn't their friendship become something more? And honestly, you're really just going to have to read it to find out how that all transpires. Annie, Ellis, and Michael become a very close trio of friends. Michael witnesses Annie and Ellis get married to one another, and then eventually at some point, Michael is just nowhere to be found. He's not referenced anywhere. He's not an active character in their lives anymore. Essentially, throughout the book, you kind of read Ellis's point of view and then Michael's as well, and you really kind of discover where Michael went in that time, what happened between the two of them, and just basically how it all transpired. The book itself is written in two parts. So the first part of the book, you're getting Ellis's perspective. The second part is Michael's. Within both of the parts, you bounce around timelines as they kind of both recount specific memories. We first meet Ellis in Oxford in 1996 as he's in the throes of loneliness and grief. You really come to find out that he lost his wife to a car accident a little while earlier, and he's never really been the same since. He recounts the memories of when they first met, and the way that this is written is just so full of grief and sadness that it's just palpable. Throughout his perspective, he really moves through these memories almost uncontrollably, and he feels the pain of everything all over again. Like I mentioned before, his mother Dora was a really strong comfort of softness in his life. And when he's remembering all these points of his life and he's thinking back to it and he's trying to feel all his feelings, he thinks about his mom quite a bit, obviously, because the two go hand in hand. And he's thinking about the time that when he found out she was sick. Essentially, he kind of found out that his mom was sick by going back in his sketchbooks, because he was always drawing his mom. He was drawing little things in his life, and he went back to his sketchbooks to try and see where the difference was started to happen, where she started acting different and therefore kind of looked different. Meanwhile, on the opposite side of that, his relationship with his father was the first male relationship father figure he had in his life. And it really had an impact on him that stays with him throughout his entire life, which you kind of come to discover as he's recounting specific memories. His father really snuffed out any gentleness or softness in him as a young boy and tried his best to do that. And it really kind of is representative of toxic masculinity. Ellis and his mother Dora were really unable to safely kind of feel tenderness and softness with his father being in the home. And Ellis remembers a time where him and Michael and Dora, they all went to this like swimming pond or river or whatever. And Michael was kind of the opposite of Ellis. Like he was a child who freely felt his tenderness and freely felt the soft side of him and pursued kind of these artistic endeavors and liked poetry without any shame whatsoever. If Ellis did ever receive any kind of kindness from his father, even into his adult life, kind of like the current day where we meet Ellis, it's in a quid pro quo format, or even covered with the guise of just like masculinity. And truly, his father, it's like a byproduct of just the way he grew up in his own way. Once we move to Ellis's perspective, which is the second half of the book, the tone is completely different. It's still very sad, but they still feel like two very distinct characters. So we meet Michael when he is in a hospital, I think it's in France, and his partner G is dying of AIDS. So he's at his bedside, holding his hand, being there for him as he's slowly slipping away. I don't really want to say much about Michael's chapters because it just makes everything come together really beautifully. How Michael kind of recounts the same memories that Ellis is, but just in a different way, in a different light. Within Michael's chapters, you learn about a specific trip to France, which was absolutely pivotal for the story. Honestly, at this point, you might be like, why would I read this? This sounds astonishingly sad. Yes, it is in some ways, absolutely. But while we're witnessing this like sadness and grief that Ellis and Michael are going through, there are characters, like side characters, who are extending such grace and kindness to both of them. Whether that be Ellis and Michael extending that kindness and grace, or them receiving it from people that they didn't expect to receive it from. Like Ellis's neighbor extended him a cup of coffee one morning, and this particular morning he experienced a difficult evening the night before, just with the memories and things that he's going through. And obviously the neighbor didn't know about this because Ellis's grief is a very quiet one. It's a quiet suffering. Within Michael's chapters, while he's at the hospital supporting his partner as he's dying, he extends kindness and support to another young boy who's there too. And when Michael is experiencing his own sadness and grief, a neighbor comes by and just kind of says, hey, I haven't seen you around in a while. And he literally hasn't spoken to this neighbor at all. And she just says, I haven't seen you in a while. I just wanted to bring you some groceries. Here's some wine too within it, and it just absolutely unravels him. It was so tender and nice to read about random people extending kindness and tenderness to two people who had no capacity to extend it to themselves in the moment. It was almost as if Sarah Winman, is taking care of the reader. Like me reading this book, being sad and feeling all the feelings for Ellis and Michael, and then seeing these just completely random characters who have no purpose to the plot per se, or Ellis or Michael's story, but seeing them extend kindness to Ellis in grief, it's almost like she was taking care of not only her characters, but the reader too. But, it was just this continuous thing as we witness the characters go through grief and love and think about the paths that they didn't pursue. Winman just does such a great job to take care of everybody and everything involved. Honestly, I think the ending to this book is one of my favorites that I have read. Everything just comes back full circle in the tiniest details. Like when Ellis is remembering the day the floorboards were delivered, his marriage to Annie, what that day looked like, and then Michael's recount of that day too. It was just so devastating and beautiful at the same time. I think the blurb on the cover says it breaks your heart and warms it all at the same time, and that is an absolute perfect description of this. Sometimes book cover blurbs are like not accurate to what the reading experience is, but this is absolutely true for sure. I will absolutely be reading more from Winman, and I hope this convinces you to either read this one or pick up some of her other books, because it was just such a wonderful reading experience. So that is my review of Tin Man by Sarah Winman. I honestly think that this is going to be one of the best books that I have read this year, and I absolutely cannot wait to buy a couple copies of this, one that I can lend out to other people and they can beat it up and do whatever, but then one for my own purposes where I can just like write in it, reread it, and highlight in it and do all the stuff. So, but do let me know if you've read this book, what your thoughts were on it, or if you've read other books by Sarah Winman and if you'd recommend them. Also, what would you say is your like top tier book? The book where if somebody asked you what your reading tastes were, you'd say, this is it. Read this to know my reading tastes. But thank you so much for hanging out with me this afternoon. I hope you all are enjoying what you're reading, and have a great day.